Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Just Energy Radio, you can listen to live on the Inception Radio Network. You can also check out our archives on iTunes at the Just Energy Radio channel, or go to the Just Energy Radio webpage, www.justenergyradio.com, where we will be hitting our 6-year anniversary in a couple of weeks. While you're there, please do sign up for our weekly newsletter that keeps you informed of the excellent programming that's coming up. So I do have a few announcements to make. Starting on January 3rd, we will be moving to Thursday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 7 to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. That'll be on December 3rd, and we'll be joined by my favorite astrologers, Deborah Clement and Michelle Avante, where we'll be talking about this year ahead from an astrological point of view. But before then, Just Energy Radio will be airing live on December 21st, 2012. That's right, just a couple of weeks. It's a Friday. We are opening up, uncharacteristically, the phone lines again that day, because we're doing a special show being called What Were You Doing While the World Was Coming to an End? Because we figure if we're airing that day, we are all still here. I'll be joined that day by John Michael Greer, a good friend of mine and a former guest on the show, where we'll be taking your calls to find out what were you doing, what were you think was going to happen, you know, about your neighbor who built the bunker in the back of his house, or like my sister did for Y2K, who bought 50 cases of beans and stacked them up in her garage, and I think she's still working on those beans. Ugh. Anyway, let's see. You know, and I want to thank everyone. Our new book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, made number 4 on Amazon. Yes, you heard that correctly. Number 4 on Amazon. We are getting rave reviews, and we do ask you to go check it out. You can purchase a copy or find out more about it on Amazon.com in both the print and Kindle version. If you want to buy a copy and would like it autographed, please do go to my webpage, which is www.soulhealer.com. And while you're there, you can check out all the different products and services I offer. Because you never know, there might be something going on in your life. You might have an issue with your health, a problem at work, something going on in your relationships. You know, you can drop me a line and we can set up a time for a private consultation. And then one last announcement I want to make. This coming Monday on Inception Radio Network, I will be hosting on the Epic Voyages show, which airs from 8 to 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. And I'll be joined by Robert Schock and Brian Forrester, who have just returned from a trip to Easter Island, and they will be downloading all of their findings and insights live on the show. We are getting kind of breaking information. They just got back the middle of last week, and they're coming here to share their finds with you. Very excited about that show. So that is Monday on the Epic Voyages show, right here live on the Inception Radio Network. So today we're joined by two guests. In the first hour, a good friend, Thomas Nolan, and we're going to be talking about his new book, The Philosophy According to Thomas III, the Holistic Warrior. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking with John Capello. Our topic of conversation is life from a psychic point of view. So let me tell you a little bit about Thomas and get him on the air. Dr. Thomas Nolan has a unique educational background, which includes a Ph.D. in social psychology of health, an MS in chemistry, and a trainer certification in behavioral modification and goal-setting. He has studied a wide range of topics, including Egyptology, Astrology, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and Silva Mind Control. Dr. Nolan has also studied with several schools, including the Rosicrucians, the School of Metaphysics, and the Gurdjieffian Movement. So from theholisticwarrior.com, please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Thomas Nolan III. Hey, Thomas, how are you?
Hi, Rita. How you doing?
I am great. I'm so glad to have you back on the show. Always nice to hear your voice.
It's my pleasure.
So you have a new book coming out. I understand it's not quite out, but will be out in the next week or two. Would that be a correct statement?
As soon as I can get it okayed and for upload, I'm in the process of uploading now and correcting whatever errors there might be. And it could be as much as a day or a week.
Well, okay. So it is currently pending.
Yes.
And so the name of the book is The Philosophy According to Thomas III, the Holistic Warrior, correct?
Actually, the Philosophy According to Thomas III, the Holistic Warrior. I am Thomas III, but I call it Thomas III.
Okay, Thomas III, the Holistic Warrior. Okay, so, Thomas, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, some time ago, I did a study of myself to see how I got to be the way I am. And that's one. Two, I wanted my grandkids to have some idea of how I got to be the way I am. And three, when I did my dissertation, I initiated the development of my own philosophy, starting with dividing God in the universe, and coming up with a different idea of health by combining the holistic health model with the biomedical model, and a new model of health arose from that I based my dissertation on, and subsequently my philosophy and teachings from there. So the book is you might say, challenge from all those three ideas as a display of my philosophy, my teachings, and my practice.
Well, Thomas, you have a really diverse background, which spans from hardcore science to philosophy to, psychology and the study of the mind to spirit. And it seems like that's just a lot of different areas to really integrate, I'm going to say, into one brain.
Yeah, well, okay, this is a lot. I'll try to condense this. First of all, I believe now I understand that I was born intuitive. I didn't know it at the time. And it seems that I spent the first part of my life learning science in order to create a balance between both sides of the brain. So the scientific part, it also gave me a methodology, a way of conducting studies and learning, because I believe that because of that background, I can deal with self-study, with the things on my own, without having to go through schools, etc. Because I find that the schools are fine, and I've been through a lot of them, but I believe I've been guided by my own guides and whatever path I'm on to come up with this. So I started with, as an engineer, working on some of the original stealth bomber work back in the 60s, a chemist working with Dowell as an oil-field service chemist, and then teaching. And from that, my dissertation was about putting all that together into one field. And now that's one part of it. Another part of it is I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I finished high school just before they integrated the schools. And as a black male, for years, I was a very angry person because I didn't like the way things were. So I first sought to change that. And I wanted to flip it and make blacks in charge. And I realized after a while that'd be the same thing. And then I discovered that I discovered Africa. I discovered Egypt. And what I realized after a while is that every group on this earth has had a chance in the sun, has a time in the sun. So all that together led to the development of what I call the Holistic Warrior Program, which is what I call myself. I'll stop right there.
Because you've had to kind of battle your own demons in order to really kind of find your freedom, your personal freedom?
You know, everybody has demons, but you don't know it, probably. And, you know, somebody told me, one of the reasons I wrote an article that's in my book, Why Was I Born Black? And I said, you're crazy. Why would I do that? And later on, I realized I did after, you know, some more data, more information. I did, and during that time, I figured out that the problem wasn't the world, the problem was me. And if I changed me, I would change the world. So that's what I've really sought to do continuously now, is work on myself. So instead of changing other people and changing other things, I began to change me. There's a lot of stuff behind that, but I won't go into that right now.
But, you know, I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, if people can kind of take a step back and look at the things that they feel inferior about or feel discriminated about, I mean, I can understand, you know, the whole idea of having to deal with, you know, the feelings you would have, you know, based on discrimination of being born black. I mean, heck, I was born a woman, you know.
Yeah.
But there are people that, you know, have weight issues or stutter or have other things going on that they need to deal with.
Yeah. I started too, but wait now. I haven't felt inferior. That's one of the crazy things about this. I don't know that I've ever felt inferior, especially academically. Socially, I might, but not academically. I knew I could hang with most people as far as they're concerned. But it's, let me put it another way. I grew up with a great set of parents who prepared me for life in more ways than I could ever know. In the sense that my mother taught me just be Thomas. My father taught me perseverance. And it took me 35 years to understand what the heck they were trying to teach me. So I think a lot of people look outside themselves for answers. They blame people and themselves for what happens. And at some point, a light bulb came on in my life, and I realized, and that was the biggest thing that could have happened to me, was when that light bulb came on and I realized I was the one that can control my life. That set the stage for setting myself up the way I am now. So, but I was angry during that time because I was always trying to show people who I am. to prove to people that I could do this, I could do that. As an engineer, as a chemist especially, hearing my colleagues who were white say that, blacks are inferior and this and that. And it's like, look, don't you see me here? I mean, you think that I'm inferior to you? I mean, I can go on and on like that. And it's many things like that. But it's part of their mindset. And so I was fighting all the time, trying to prove things. And I'll give you an example. When I was a chemist, every time the laboratory director came in when I first started, I'd jump and make sure I was busy. And one day I looked around and nobody else was jumping. So I said, oh. And then I got a chance, my group that I was a part of, I've been a part, I guess almost every job I was a part of, I was a part of the rabble rouser, the crazy group that everybody feared. And we went head to head every day. And I could stay with them very easily. We'd go to the coffee bar and go head to head with other people. And at that time, I like messing with people anyway. Their head, that is. And because I knew I didn't want to fight because I don't like pain. But mentally, I could hold my own with just about anybody. So that was cool. But on the other hand, that's a responsibility I felt that I had to be successful. I had to make it in order for other folks to make it. That puts a lot of pressure on you. So that, along with anger, along with other things, in all kind of ways, it eats on you. And one day I realized it wasn't hurting other people, it was hurting me. So I went through a 5-year period that I call my wilderness years, during my dissertation period, where I began to change myself and reestablish myself in the way that I am now. I'll stop right there again.
But, I'm really enjoying this story because I think people can kind of relate. You said that you didn't feel inferior, however, and I'm going to throw out a however, you created a response, or you had responses in order to battle the energy of your inferior being tossed at you. You would jump up when the boss came in. You strove to excel, to, show them that, no, I'm not. So even though in your mind you were like, you're an idiot. But anyway, but there was still, it created a reactive place in you.
Yeah, well, see, part of that, too, is, okay, I had an excellent group of teachers coming up. And I don't know that I could have been prepared better because they made sure that we were prepared in terms of understanding and use of English, that we understood math, that we understood all these things. And I was able to take advantage of, for instance, I had 3 years of music in high school. We did the HMS Pinafore, and I was a boatsman as a part of that group. To get in our choir, you had to take a year mixed chorus and learn to sing from your diaphragm, to learn to sight sing, to learn to read music. I played in the band, and I played French horn. It's like all these things prepared me, but at the same time, it was touted into us that we had to be successful, that we had to be the best at everything. So, because when you look around you, okay, let's try to give an example. You look at Central High School, which I won't talk too much about, but this is a building complex that was probably 3 blocks by 6 blocks rectangular, including stadium, all kinds of tennis courts and stuff and everything. My high school was the best high school in Arkansas as far as blacks was concerned, but it was like a half a block square. No stadium, no practice field until we built a new high school when I was a senior. And so Then I can look at the college I went to, a black school, Langston in Oklahoma. They have a great facilities set now. But then, compared to other schools in the state, it was lacking in terms of money. So people could look at your school, your place, your houses and things and say, something's wrong with y'all. Look at what we have. Even the ones that didn't have anything, because they could point to people who did. So all this eats on you. You grow up, and I can tell you stories. Like, when I was 5, my parents taught me respect, and I still do that now. I speak to people no matter how many times I see them a day. And it's like you call people by their, like Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so. And this white man came to our house and called my mother by her first name. And I let him tell, what the heck are you doing? Oh, she set me up quick. Never will forget that. And I didn't understand until later to save my life was gone. So it's a lot of things like that. And I'm sort of rambling, but I'm trying to put a lot of things together here. That you are programmed with, that you just about fight. Because I think in your childhood and your early, as a small child, teenager, you set up for the problems you're going to have the rest of your life. I understand that now. And then at some point in your life, as you wake up, then you work to overcome all those perceptions, all those ideas. So at first I was fighting, not only for me, but for other people, other blacks, who didn't have it. When I first came to Darwell, I was the first, in fact, I've been the first black professional at every job I've been in. When I first came to Darwell, there were maybe a couple of secretaries working there, if that many. Maybe one other person or two other people besides myself. When I left there 5 years later, they had hired 20 more blacks, including 3 professional black chemists and technicians, 3 professional black chemists and other technicians as well. So part of my goal was not only to help me to be successful, but to be a pathway for other black folks to be successful as well. So the fighting is not only for myself, but it's for other people like me.
Well, one of the things that I see happening now, I mean, because I believe, and I think you would agree with me, but I'd like to hear your opinion, that there are a lot of people that are starting to wake up to who they are and their place in the world. But unlike you, they kind of want the quick fix. It's like, well, I read this book and I listened to this meditation tape and I did affirmations for like 15 minutes and it's not better. Maybe you can like do a healing session for me, or actually one of the things, I mean, I for the listeners, I do work with entities, so if you have an entity attached to you, blah, 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 I help you deal with it. But I get these people that think they have entities attached to them to explain all of the woes that they have in their life, where it's really more about fixing yourself and working on yourself.
Well, I'm going through that myself too now. Where
you had an entity? Just kidding.
And I realized that didn't work. So I can understand. I think at first, when you first get in, I mean, you think I wanted it to be fast. I was looking for ways to get that consciousness in the way that I want. I'm 73 years old now, and I've had a chance to look at things and know that. Oh, I know how to put this. It's almost obvious, but this finally came to me maybe about within the last 10 years. You cannot be without God. Now, that's one of the most profound statements anybody can understand. Once you understand you cannot be without God, you don't need saving. Nobody needs saving. So you've got to go through whatever experience you go through until you wake up. And however long it takes, it really doesn't make any difference. That's one of the ideas that changed my life. Because once I understood that, then I don't have to save myself or anybody else.
Well, and when you make that comment, I know you consider yourself a spiritual person, but when you're talking about, knowing God or relating to God, are you talking about it from a spiritual perspective or from the point of view of religion?
I really don't care. Just about that. I am spiritual. But it makes no difference. To me, it's a fundamental... even from a religious standpoint, we say God is everything. And if God is everything, how can you be without God? Even if you reason it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that some people will have a difficulty time dealing with that. It doesn't make any difference to me. Because at some point they will understand. I just don't have to spend the time trying to change them. Because actually I can't. And if I try to do that, I'm messing them up and myself up too. Because I'm preventing them from growing and learning from their own lessons. You know how and I talked about this in my classes, our parents tell us we won't understand now, but we would understand later. And we tell our kids that. And I always ask them, we go, why do you understand now? Because once you have a certain amount of experience and something happens because of that experience, you begin to change. You begin to seek certain things. And whether it takes one lifetime or a million lifetimes or 2 lifetimes, or whether it takes 1 year or 1,000 years, it doesn't make any difference.
But there are so many people that are afraid to change. They're afraid to look at their own stuff, or they're just not even aware that there's stuff that needs to be fixed.
But that's the whole point. You and I have already been there in past lives. I believe in
this
past
lifetime
lives
too.
Huh?
I said, hell, this lifetime too.
Yes, that's right. And what I'm saying is that you have to go through this, the fear and all like this. Another way to put this is, how can you know what's good if you don't know what's bad? And it's like when you have those experiences, when you live life, it's like singing the blues. I never thought it's like singing the blues. You can't sing the blues unless you've experienced the blues. It's an old thing.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. And once you experience it, now you have an energy place that you can go to, and you can actually sing because you feel it. To me, it's all about feeling. And that was another thing that changed too, because before 37, it was all about thinking. Now, to me, it's all about feeling. Because when I feel, I can use both sides of the brain. When I think, I can only use one side of the brain.
But
That's
and I'm just going to call upon your scientific wisdom. But aren't the thinking and feeling parts of the brain, aren't they like on opposite sides structurally?
Okay. This is part of my book too. This is what the foundation.
I'm bringing out that doctor part.
This is where the foundation comes in.
Wait, say that again.
And I'm going to come out of science but be in science at the same time. I look at an outer self, an inner self, and a higher self. Now, the outer self and inner self can also be compared. That's a set of books that comes from Galway that has to do with inner skiing, inner tennis, inner golf. Published way back in the early 80s, late 70s. And he talks about a self-one, self-two. Self-one thinks it knows what to do and how to do it, but can only think about it. Whereas self-two can do it. So it's like playing 8-ball. And you shoot and you run the table. Most people who don't understand, once they get to the 8-ball, the money ball, they will stop and start thinking, and they're going to miss the 8-ball because they got out of self-two. When they ran the table, they were in self-two. Self-two is connected with the source and connected with everything, so it can make those connections. Self-one can only be in one place at a time. So, left-brain thinking might be looked upon as self-one. It thinks it knows what to do, and it wants to be controlled. It also operates from the outside in. So it can only do one thing at a time. Self-two, on the other hand, is like the inner self. The inner self is the repository of all the knowledge that you have from this lifetime and other lifetimes, and allows you to come up with those unique solutions that you come up with. You say, I'll sleep on it, or I'll let it go, and the answer comes to you. It's when you play ball, and once you learn through self-one, self-two can take over and put it all together. You got to learn it first, but self-two can take over and put it all together. The higher self is like our soul, our connection with the source, with God or whatever, that has our overall plan for this life. But it's that self-one and self-two, to me, that's the whole billywhack, so to speak. In my book, I also have a topic about Adam and Eve that explains the purpose of self-one and self-two. And it boils down to this. When self-one is more I don't want to do that. Okay. Let me back up. The purpose of life to me is to progress to higher planes. So that means that as you master energy and you begin to understand things, then you research the understanding that gives you knowledge to practice and go on from there. It also expands your energy, and once your energy expands to a certain point, you can move to the higher, you vibrate fast enough to go to the next level. So self-one has the experience of life. Self-two makes sense of that experience. Ask the question because I want to make sure I stay on the right track here.
Okay. So what does that have to do with Adam and Eve?
Okay. I'll try to make this, okay. That's what's called the Book of Thomas, my namesake. They teach in religion, church, that Thomas was a doubting Thomas. But Thomas was not a doubting Thomas. Thomas was Gnostic, G-N-O-S-T-I-C, which means inner knowing. In fact, the patron saint of the Egyptian Coptic Church, in the Ethiopian Coptic Church, and the other churches of that type. When Thomas said, I have to see the whole, he's not doubting. He said, I have to have my own experience. All right. The first line of the Book of Thomas, and I paraphrase, he who understands the words therein shall not know death. The last line in the Book of Thomas, about verse 125 or 126, and I paraphrase again. And Peter said to Jesus, let Mary leave us, because she is not whole, she is not male, and as she is not male, she cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus said, I would personally make her male, and every woman who makes herself male should enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, when I read that, I thought that was awful sexist, until I remembered the first line. In talking with a guy named Roy, and I don't remember Roy's last name, in Santa Fe, I met him. He carves wood and makes these sculptures that are just fantastic. And we had some really cool discussions. And one day, discussing with him, this idea came up. Okay. It goes like this. When you take, in the nucleus of an atom, there's a beta particle and a proton and a neutron. The way it creates stability is that a neutron breaks up into a beta particle and a proton. The beta is minus, and the beta is like an electron, and the proton is positive. At the same time, another beta particle and a proton recombines to form another neutron. The mass of a proton is almost equal to the mass of a neutron, so they call it 1 like they call a neutron. The mass of a beta particle is 1 over 1,250th of the mass of a neutron. But when the neutron goes to the proton plus the electron, it is not called a neutron anymore. Now here's the rub. When Adam, in the Bible, the rib is taken out of him to create Eve, he is still called Adam. And he's not Adam anymore. He's not the same. Just like that neutron is not the same. He's different. But they still call him Adam, and that's a misnomer. In fact, that Adam is not whole anymore because Eve was taken out. That rib is like the beta particle, which is 1 over 1,250th of that mass. So, and put all this together. When Jesus said, I will personally make Mary male, he's not talking about making her male like me. He's saying male here as mean whole. He had helped the disciples become whole, and all he's saying is when people make themselves whole, they can enter the kingdom of heaven the next level up. So, using that same analogy, when the last book of the second chapter with Adam and Eve, where Eve is created, and it said, and that's why, the next to the last verse, and that's why man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and the two become one. So using the analogy of when the beta particle and the proton come together, they form another neutron. When Adam and Eve on the physical plane come together, they create a baby. But in this case, spiritually, Adam and Eve represent the outer self and the inner self. And when they come together on the inner self, they create a new consciousness. And that's what it, to me, is all about.
Well, I think it's interesting that quote from the book of Thomas about Jesus making Mary whole, which, whatever, if they're not referring to how, more from the perspective of, the balance of male-female energy.
Okay, let's get you have to first. Okay, this is symbolism. Now, and I'm taking all religious references out of this. Jesus had already helped the disciples to become whole, and all he's saying is any female, any male, essentially, become whole. In order to come to heaven, they have to become whole. That means the male and female, like for you, your male would be the inner part of you, the female, the outer part of you. My male is the outer part of me, and the female is the inner part of me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, to me, when the outer part of our consciousness, self-one, the outer consciousness, cooperates and combines with the inner consciousness, step 2, they create a new higher consciousness. This is a model for everybody, male or female.
But isn't that also kind of, if you think of the concept of being authentic, I mean, what's coming to mind is like Gary Zukav, where he talks about where your inner world, you can't tell the difference between your inner world and your outer world because there's just a congruency between what's going on inside of you and how you're manifesting that on the physical plane.
When you have that balance, you can do that. Well, that's the difficulty with where we are right now, is that most of us have been taught to deal with self-one exclusively. And we've been programmed by this outer culture to be the way we are. So part of the awakening is understanding is what happens outside of you is important, but what happens inside of you and your connection with the higher plane, the Creator, that's the most important thing there is.
But it seems like in our society, and I mean, I'm not saying this to everybody, but that we're programmed into this is the appropriate way of being and this is the appropriate way of acting, regardless of how that relates to what's going on inside of us.
Say that again.
That in our society, we're programmed to think and act, in a certain way that might not be congruent to who we really are on the inside.
Oh, I agree. Yes, I agree. But that's what I'm saying. That's part of the program that's what I call civilized society. Civilized society, before civilization, all peoples on this earth were indigenous. And they had for the most part, a female deity. When civilization came along, it changed from female to male. There's a book by Eric Fromm called The Forgotten Language, in which he first, and I read this way back in the 70s, the middle 70s. Yeah, the middle 70s. And it began, that was the first, and I didn't understand it then. But it talked about that the story of Little Red Riding Hood is the portrayal of the world going from matriarchy to patriarchy. A matriarchal society is based on balance between male and female. A patriarchal society is based on dominance of one group. Whether it's male or female, one group is dominant. That's civilized world to me. And it says that I'm going to program you to be the way I want you to be. And look at the fight in our country right now for the soul of the United States. It's like each group is trying to say, this is the way you're supposed to be. And if you don't do it the way I say it ought to be, then something's wrong with you. And I think
there is that show on TV, that Mankind, the history of all of us or whatever, which I thought was a huge joke. So I'm not advocating the show. Unless you want a good laugh, make some popcorn, crack a beer, and have a good laugh, because it was pretty funny, in my opinion, if you have any understanding of, our history at all. But one of the things that they talked about in there, which did strike a chord with me, was talking about the advent of war. And one of the things that they said was there wasn't any conflict until really the advent of agriculture and civilization, because now we are putting our time and energy into this thing here, and we're claiming ownership. So I'm the farmer, I go out, I tend these fields, and these people over here want to come and steal it, and it created this whole mine versus, yours and ownership and property that we defended, which I thought was really probably the only good insight I got out of that whole show.
Yeah. Daniel Quinn's Ishmael awakened me to that concept. I mean, it changed my whole life back in '96, and I've had a chance to meet him. It's a very good book. That just changed everything. And that's essentially what he's talking about, is that, to me, the whole planet was the Garden of Eden. Because when you are indigenous to your area, wherever you grew up, in that point, you had everything you needed. But it's like somebody decided, if I want an apple, I don't want to wait till apple season. I want it now. And that's where agriculture began to develop. Now, he also talked about the idea that there was war, but in the initial part of war, it was one of siege, where you surround this community and starve them to death. But if you have your own food source, it's hard to do that. But here's where the thing comes in. When there was war before between indigenous groups, whoever won did not try to change the other group of people. You were allowed to be the same. But when agriculture, totalitarianism, civilized world began to have war, not only, you see, when you have your own food source, what happens to the population?
They just do what they do. No,
it explodes. It grows.
Oh,
and the more you grow, what do you need? You need more land. So you invade people to get more land. And because you can starve people out because you have your own food source, you're going to win. In war, it's not about killing people, it's about wounding people. Because if you kill one person, that's only one person. Well, if you wound somebody, it takes 2 or 3 people to get that person out. So it becomes a war of attrition. So if you have your own food source, you're going to win for the most part. So because you need more land, then you have more land, you have more food, so you have more people, which means you need more land. So you become a virus, like kudzu. The plant kudzu, and it came from Japan. And so what it means then is that you begin to change other people, which means they give up their birthright.
But it doesn't seem like that really came into play until, the more modern times, where it wasn't as much the countries, the conquerors, quote unquote, as it was the missionaries that came in and tried to change everything. When you look at cultures that were earlier, they might come in and impose laws and want your money. They might want stuff, but they didn't as much, and I'm going to say as much, go in and try to change your culture and change your traditions.
I'm going to do a science on you again.
Okay.
Whatever. You know what an exponential curve is, right?
Yep.
Okay. A good example of that is a particular kind of bamboo. You plant it, and for 5 years, it looks like nothing has happened. And in the 5th year, all of a sudden, it grows 20 to 40 feet. So, there's a particular S-curve in technology, too. So, in that exponential curve, for a long time, you don't see things happening. But then, as it begins to multiply and double each time, at some point, it explodes. So what you see as an explosion is a long history of that long period where it looked like nothing's happening, but the foundation was being laid. So, but that's not something else to deal with, too. There's a TV program that I'm trying to find copies of. It's called What the Ancients Knew. And it's from the Science Channel. And it talks about ancient Egypt, ancient Roman, India, and China. Most everything we know right now comes from China and India. For a long time, we thought the concept of zero came from the Arabs, and it came from the Indians in India. There's hundreds, thousands of things that the Chinese developed. In many cases, they didn't know they developed because after a while, they got closed off, like the clock. I had a chance to. My wife had a workshop in Toronto, in the Toronto Museum of Art, and I had a chance to tour that museum, and they had a Chinese exhibit. Now, just one thing. The Chinese invented polo more than 3,000 years ago, and women played polo. Now, that was crazy. Polo. And that's just one indication of how information was developed in one place. What the Europeans did to me is they were able, and the Greeks and Romans, they were able to take what the Egyptians and Indians and Chinese developed, and they're the ones that spearheaded the exponential growth of that. But it started from there.
Well, they had this 5-gallon jug of whiteout, or a little bit of acid, and they would just take their name. They took off the Made in China sticker and just slapped their own on top, and nobody even noticed. So I have to tell you, Jim in the chat room asked me to tell you, and I hope I'm saying this right, I think Christianity has become a Wolly, W-O-L-L-Y, Wolly. He said you would know what it is. I don't.
Now, I had a workshop years ago that was called Heal the Wollies of Your Life. And a wolly is a pattern, a habit that keeps you down. Now, that's one thing.
Oh, so I guess that's what that means.
Unless he's talking about the woolly masters. But I had a workshop way back in the...
He put it's in Thompson's holistic warrior training. So
Yeah. Back in, it was the late 80s. And that was one of my first workshops in terms of how that helped me cure my cancer. Was heal the wollies of your life. And a woolly is a pattern that you developed years ago and forgot about it. So it's like you're cutting your lawn and you forget about it, the lawnmower keeps on cutting. So there are patterns and habits that are underneath that control us without us even knowing it. So I had a way of getting to the roots of that and clearing those patterns. That was one of the first things I developed back in the late 80s.
Well, and there's so much that we operate on that is sitting in, those buffer zones that we're not there. There's just no consciousness of that. We have this little program running in the background.
Oh yes, way, and that's what I'm working with every day. Is discovering those programs, discovering those control issues that keeps us where we are. It's like you work on stuff and you're working stuff and you find yourself doing it again. Like, what am I doing? And what I work on is when I discover it, deal with it right then and move on. Don't worry about it. Don't dwell on it. Just change it and keep on going.
It's fun. That's because you're smart. I mean, then there's, people like me that maybe find that a little bit challenging. I mean, maybe because we have about 7 minutes left, 6 or 7 minutes left. Maybe you can give us a couple of ideas of, if we want to start making these changes and address the woolies in our lives, or if they come up, what can we do? What can we do to start bringing in this change so that we can get more control and more autonomy over ourselves and experience some freedom, some personal freedom?
Yes. Like you, I do readings. And I talk about this in my classes that I teach as well. For me, everything starts with the heart. So what I show people is ways of getting to the heart. And whether you use animals, or it's like look at what you really like doing when you sort of lose yourself. Everybody is in the heart at one time or another. In fact, more times than they think. They just don't know it. So people who do gardening, so in my management classes that I teach, I ask the question, what do you like doing? So some people say, I like gardening. And I ask them, when you're in your garden and you're putting it around, what happens to the world? And invariably they say it goes away. When they run and they're in that stride, they're in that zone, it goes away. It's whatever they're doing, playing music or reading, the world goes away. That's when you're in your heart. So what I show people is a way of getting to their heart consciously. And then once in the heart, I show that that heart area is connected with the source. Now, the biggest thing with that, though, is it has to do with how we deal with other people. And this came about, I've read a lot of books. My library in my office is, I have 7, 8 foot by 4 foot bookcases of books, double, triple stack. Now they're mostly on tape and audio file. But anyway, yes. Most of us, we're taught in our society that it's better to give than receive. And that, to me, the idea of giving and that it's better to give than receive is the worst thing anybody can do. And that freaks people out when I say that. But then I say, how often are you drained by people? Now, a side issue. This came about after reading, after several times, Redfield's The Celestine Prophecy. Insight 4 talks about how we get energy from each other. And that was an awakening. So drama to me is about how we get energy from each other because we don't know how to get it for ourselves. So we create drama with somebody, and when we win, we feel good because we got the energy. We feel bad when we lose because they get the energy away from us. That's about giving. So people want to give all the time, and what happens is when you give all the time, you're not receiving, so you're going to get drained, and that's not good. If you're always giving, you cannot receive. That's even worse, which means people cannot give to you. So to me, it's about giving and receiving. Now, there's a scientific basis of that, too. And that has to do with trees and plants. We breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants and trees like that. They breathe out oxygen. We like that. But suppose the trees got together and said, trees of the world unite. We're tired of humans cutting us down. So we're going to tell all the plants in the ocean and seas to stop giving off oxygen, which means we're going to die. It also means the trees are going to die.
You know, I love that example, and I'm going to totally steal it.
That's fine.
I'll remember it, and I'll have your face tied to it, so I'll at least give you credit.
Very good, very good. But see, the thing with this, that is the law of life. And the law of life is to give and receive. If we don't give and receive, everything goes. You don't have to worry about gravity. You don't have to worry about any other law. If the universe stops giving and receiving, it's going to disappear.
Okay,
so
we need to wrap up. So
okay. So what I'm saying is,
I know
once
you're
able to get to your heart, and you understand about giving and receiving with yourself, you create your own base of energy, which means you don't need anybody else's energy, which means you can be with somebody, then you can give and receive. I do not allow people to drain me because I connect with it. It's all about what I call connection. And once you connect with yourself, the Creator and everybody else, you have your own energy source, which means you can be with other people safely. And when you give and receive with somebody, 1 + 1 is not 2. It could be 100, 1,000, a million. And that, to me, is the definition of love.
All right, Thomas, the
means
music is going to come up while you're talking, and I would like to put out the name of your book again, where people can get it in a week or so, your webpage, all that information, very, very quickly, very, very quick.
Let's say that again? Oh, the book is called, The Philosophy Called According to Thomas III, and it should be up in the next week, and hopefully it'll be on Kindle and that. My website is www.theholisticwarrior.com.
Thomas, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I think everyone's brains are full and have lots to think about, which I love.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, and I will talk to you again soon, and people get his book because it's The Philosophy According to Thomas. Yay. So we're going to go to break, and we will be back after the break with our next guest.
Energy Radio with
John
your host,
Capella.
Dr. Rita
We're
Louise,
going to
will
be
return
talking
right
about
after these messages.
living life from a psychic point of view. Until then, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio, live on the Inception Radio Network.